If we didn't have Cosatu, we wouldn't have the democracy we have today. Labor is a very important redistributive mechanism in society. Without labor, we are not able to redistribute social gains in any country, and particularly without organized labor. And so, in the context of South Africa, where we've had very deep inequality, labor has been important. But again, there's an important question: how far has it gone? Has it gone sufficiently forward to ensure that particularly vertical inequality has been addressed substantively and sufficiently? So I think these two premises are important for this book. The idea that Cosatu has been a democratizing force, but did it lose its way somewhere along the way over the past few decades? And of course, playing a role around redistribution and ultimately transformation. Where has it come short? In terms of where we are now, Cosatu is in crisis. And there have been various theses or attempts to explain this crisis. The one we dispensed with very quickly was the big man explanation, the Stumo versus Vavi explanation of everything. This has been the narrative in the media in South Africa, and we find it a bit it's inadequate. But at the same time, there have been other attempts to explain the crisis. There's been an ideological attempt to explain the crisis and to reduce the crisis to an ideological understanding of revolution. The idea of the National Democratic Revolution, two-stage versus one-stage, that's been one attempt to explain the crisis of labor. And what you are seeing in labor based on this ideological argument is a break based on a realization that labor has lost ground, has been defeated, and there's a need now to reclaim this ground. Another argument that's been made to explain the crisis of Cosatu is around trade union democracy, and that what we've seen is an evisceration and an undermining of worker control inside the trade union movement, a bureaucratization, if you like, and a social distance that's been emerging. Again, we attempt to engage with this particular argument very critically in the text. And the third argument that's been put out is the class divide inside Cosatu. Now, there have been some very discernible structural shifts in the labor market that give particular strength and cogency to this argument. You've seen a shift in the skills base of workers, and particularly in how they compose labor, from very unskilled to semi-skilled. You've seen precarity become more salient in the South African labor market. We have about 8 million formal workers in South Africa and about 4.8 atypical. And increasingly, this divide between core and non-core has also been reflected in the composition of Cosatu. And then thirdly, there's been the ascendance of public sector unions inside Cosatu. The center of gravity, the shift, has been around a move from 3 public sector unions in 1994 to about 7 public sector unions. Now, the middle class in South Africa has been bloated mainly in the public sector, over 4 to 5 million new African middle class people linked to the public sector. Now, this is a factor also in Cosatu and gives a particular strength to this explanation of a class divide inside Cosatu. So we engage with these arguments in this book. And finally, to say that the big question that we all kind of reflect on is where to for labor, given the multifaceted crisis of Cosatu. And again, we don't engage in prediction and that kind of thing, but based on the actual dynamics that have come to the fore, we think about this question at 2 levels. The first level is at the political level, recognizing that the NUMSA moment, the decisions taken in December 2013 by the Metal Workers Union, the largest union in this country, over 340,000 members, deciding to withdraw its support for the ANC in the election that came, deciding to withdraw from the alliance and deciding to pursue a path towards a realignment of the left, probably around a united front of resistance, and maybe a political instrument. That development is very, very important in terms of the possibilities for labor in South Africa at a political level. Now, does this development portend or yield, if you like, the possibilities of a united left and ultimately a new workers' party? That's a question that we grapple with. At an ideological level, is this the harbinger of a new kind of politics? Is it a remaking of Marxism, Leninism, of a new type, SACP2, or is it something different or something novel? Is it the harbinger of an articulation of democratic eco-socialism, for example? And these are questions that also we grapple with in the book. The second level of thinking about where labor is going to in post-apartheid South Africa is, of course, the future trajectories of unionism. And in this regard, again, there are a host of possibilities. The one, of course, is an extremely tumultuous industrial relations order. Strike-ridden, strike-prone violence marks this industrial relations order, and that's a very serious possibility, and it's imminent in the trends that we are seeing. The other possibility is a reinstitutionalizing of labor. And in the African context, and particularly the post-colonial context, this has not been very successful. And with the comparative lens that comes through in some of the work in this volume, in this text, we look at particular experiences where labor tries to, if you like, disengage from the tradition of national liberation politics. So whether it's in Zambia or in Ghana, even Zimbabwe, we haven't seen a success story, if you like, in the African context. The refinding of labor's independence has been fraught and tenuous in the African context. So ultimately, we pose this question: is the reinstitutionalizing of labor either as a new federation, either as a general workers' union around NUMSA? Are these the trajectories for a kind of reinstitutionalized labor?